Hello and welcome back to the RinkMasters podcast. My name is Noah and I'll be your host today, and I'm joined by my good friend Alex. Today we had a great opportunity to interview the mayor of Prince George, Mayor Lyn Hall. We had a great discussion about sports in Prince George and kind of just a number of topics, just ranging from mentality, in sports, kind of the mental aspect of how sports can benefit the population of a city, all the way to the city of Prince George's role in upgrading sporting facilities in town. So it is really worth the listen. But before we head over to that, there's been a pretty terrible situation in Vancouver over the last week. So Alex, why don't you tell us a bit about that?
Well, unfortunately, the Vancouver Canucks have confirmed several cases within their roster. And all we could say is our sympathy goes out to them. Of course, as much as us as Canadians love hockey, we also love the safety of our beloved players. And I'm sure that we would always want to prioritize that they have a speedy recovery and that they'd be able to play a game of hockey again relatively soon.
Yeah, so thank you. And once again, I think that in this case, health is the priority. I know I've seen lots of people just urging them to get back to play as soon as possible, but you know what? We've seen like some of the more severe cases, even the ones that don't lead to death, right? There can be some pretty lasting effects. So especially with this many in the Canucks organization, even with the conflicting reports, this is obviously very bad news, and we hope that they can recover as soon as possible. And then once that's happened, that the NHL and the Canucks organization and the owners, NHLPA, whoever it is that's involved, can come to a good decision on where to proceed with that, right? So yeah, our hearts go out to them again, and yeah. So now let's head over to the interview. I hope you enjoy and stick around for the whole thing because it's definitely worth the listen. Welcome, Lyn, to the RinkMasters podcast. I mean, for those of you who don't know, Lyn Hall is the mayor of Prince George, and we are incredibly honored to have him on our podcast this week. So, I mean, quickly, if you want to just say a quick bit about yourself, feel
Sure.
free.
Yeah, sure. And thanks very much, Noah. It's a pleasure to be here. I've been trying to get on. I know you'd invited me a while ago, and just one thing after another came about. But I'm glad we can get on. I really enjoy talking sports. I've been involved in sports since I was a little kid, and I really enjoy talking about it. And I'm usually glued to any kind of sports casting shows that are going on. Love watching sports on TV, and this is perfect. I'm really looking forward to the conversation and talk a little bit about the sports I was involved in as a player, and what I did as a coach, and what we're doing as a city. Opportunity for me to brag about what's going on out there in the sports world in Prince George.
Exactly. That's what I was kind of hoping we could talk about. So yeah, so why don't you tell us a bit about your personal involvement in sports?
Sure. I grew up in a small town. I grew up in Dawson Creek, and hockey was a big deal. Every kid that I hung around with played hockey, whether it was formalized minor hockey or we played on outdoor rinks. If we weren't playing inside the arena and in structured games, we were on the outdoor rink playing 7 days a week. And of course, it's quite a while ago, but we did get winter. We had lots of snow and lots of cold, so we had lots of ice outside. I played hockey, and then of course school sports, played a lot of basketball, a lot of volleyball right from the time I was in elementary school until I graduated. Went away to university and then did played a little bit of hockey, intramural stuff when I was at university, but always really loved the game. And when I moved to Prince George, had the opportunity, of course, Cougars were in town, the Spruce Kings were in town. So it was a lot of fun to watch, and still is. A little known fact about me is that I did play for the Bruins. I don't know if you knew that or not.
I didn't actually. So
But now I'm going to burst your bubble a bit. So I'm old enough to have been in the era where there were the 6 original teams, and in Dawson Creek, when they had the Minor Hockey Association had the Pee Wee Pups, and the Pee Wee Pups were divided into the 6 original teams, and I was put on the Bruins. And I will tell you, Noah, that we had the sweater with the Bruins logo on it and Dawson Creek Minor Hockey, the whole works. So it just stands to reason that I ended up becoming a Bruin fan and am to this day. I've got
yeah,
these other teams that I cheer for, but I thought I better put that out there.
yes. Yeah, so I mean, yeah, so and beyond that, I was going to say it's probably been pretty cool for you. I mean, both your daughters got to play for the
Yeah.
university soccer teams, so and actually both of them have gotten to coach me at different points in
Oh,
time.
good.
So, yeah, Jordan is the goalie coach, and then Sydney
Yeah.
for more outfielder stuff. So that's been
Yeah.
pretty cool, right? Pretty involved family there, hey?
Yeah, it was very cool for us. And I'm actually looking at something that's just on the windowsill of my office. And it's what year is it? It's 2015 was the girls' last year. And I think it's titled Hall and the Family. And it's the twin sisters nearing end of soccer journey. And it's quite a story that was done. And yeah, I think it was, I think it's 2015 that I see it up there. It was. I coached the girls for a little while and did coach quite a bit of soccer. Coached them for a while until they just got absolutely too good for me to coach. And so I got shuffled, lost my coaching job. But we were very proud of them, my wife and I, and we had a lot of fun watching them play soccer. I think from the time they were about 7 years old, Noah. We had a great
Yeah.
time. It was a great family event for us. And the other thing I played, I don't know of much broom ball being played anymore, but I played a little bit of broom ball when I was in high school, living in Dawson. That was a lot of fun, something different, but again on ice. So
Yeah. Yeah, actually, one of my worst sports memories was broom ball. We played at the carnival at school because I went to one of the French immersion
yeah,
English split ones. I went to College Heights Elementary, and then we'd always have the carnival, right? Put on by the Francophone Society. And we played broom ball, and one day I accidentally hit one of the other students in the face with the
oh,
stick, and it felt so bad. It's one of the worst things, but yeah,
well,
not a great memory of that, but
it's
yeah,
it's a tough sport. And when I first played it, I thought broom ball, and guy handed me a broom. Well, it was not a broom. It
yeah,
was a stick with a chunk of plastic on the end of it, and they hurt when you got hit with them.
yeah, for sure. So kind of move on to a bit broad talks to more of the city. Like, what do you think is the importance of sports to the city of Prince George, or
Yeah.
even just like cities or towns in general?
I think that it is absolutely the makeup and has been for quite some time of a community, whether it's a small community like Dawson, or you look around Vanderhoof, Mackenzie, Prince George size. It is really the makeup and the fabric of a community. Everybody seemed to center their lives at one point or another around an arena or a curling rink or a swimming pool. And, I'm going to include a couple of other things here too, because we're really seeing the arts and culture community as well. I know it's not a sport, but those are the components that really solidify a community and make Prince George what it is. I remember coming over here as a kid and playing basketball at the Lakewood Secondary School and playing against still called the Spruce Kings in my day, when we would come over here and play in the old Coliseum and fill the place for a junior game or just even a minor hockey game. That was the significance and the importance of sport in a community. It's amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. So, and kind of like along with that, right? The sports then goes with like has a big role in mental and physical health in the whole community, but especially in youth, right? So can you tell us a bit more about that?
Sure. The the participation from a physical perspective and getting out and being active is so important. And it's stressed over and over again when I was going to school. Get involved in something, cross-country running, basketball, soccer, whatever it might be. Just get that physical activity in. And I think schools really, went to the nth degree to provide that for students. And that was really important for that physical aspect of it. And then I think as I got a little bit older, realized that, there's an aspect of this that really, I think provides for better mental health. And I think for me, it was, it was about my teammates. And I played a lot of team sports other than I played a lot of tennis, so which isn't so much a team sport, but I think that because of the team sport aspect, it really was mental sort of well-being for me as well, because you had teammates, you created relationships, you created friendships, and some of those friendships I still have to this day. And we played hockey together when I was a young kid, 12 or 13 years old. We're still buddies, and we still keep in touch, and we still think we can play as good today as we did when we were in our 20s, So it's I think from a mental well-being perspective, that's what it's about for me. And just that camaraderie is just so healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. I know for me, it's always been. I mean, my sport has really been soccer. I
Yeah.
did play basketball for a year in high school. That was interesting for sure. Grade 8 basketball is a journey, but yeah, like I always enjoyed the team aspect of sports, right?
Yeah.
Like it's cool to have that group of guys that you play with, right? And that you go through life in some sense with, especially if you're on a traveling team, right? Like you spend a lot more time together, and yeah, it's really important, right? It's almost an anchor in some sense.
Yeah.
I mean,
Agree.
obviously there's some other things in terms of mental health that it can be a bit of a detriment to, but I think it is generally positive, right? And it is really important, especially now when we're starting to see lots of the research come out, I think, with in terms of so many teens struggling with
Mhm.
mental health issues, right? And
Yeah.
like that sports can help in that sense, right? So
If I could, I think, no, that's why I was so happy when Dr. Henry started to, I think, loosen the restrictions around sporting events, despite the fact that perhaps you could only do a little bit of training and drills and there was no real competition. I think that it got kids out on the ice. It got kids in gymnasiums, even if they were just training and playing a little basketball, a little volleyball, whatever it was. And just to stress the fact that if you can't do those things, get out and walk the trails. We've got lots and lots of trails in there. You get into Moores Meadow and those kinds of areas to enjoy. But and you mentioned the team and traveling. Well, coming from Dawson Creek, we didn't have a lot of competition, and our shortest trip was to Fort St. John, which was about probably 35 miles, 40 miles. So
yeah,
we were always in vehicles or on the bus together. It was real
yeah,
important. Yeah.
yeah. And in terms of you're mentioning the trails in the city, I know I really enjoyed walking at Ginter's.
Mhm.
Um, Ginter's, I love seeing all the dogs there. It's always
Yeah.
fun. You get some dogs that don't seem to like other people or dogs, but generally they're really nice, and it's always fun to walk there.
Yeah, I think it's good. We've gone a couple of times with my daughter Jordan's dog, and yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's just nice to get out, especially
Yeah.
now. Especially now.
Yeah, so kind of what role do you think that the city has to help support youth through sports?
A couple things. One, obviously, is from a facility perspective, trying to make sure that we have top-notch facilities in the community. And I look out my window right now, and the new pool construction. We hope to have that open third quarter of 2022. And that'll be a huge focal point for our community. So we have two fantastic facilities for swimming, diving, swim competitions, recreational swimming, those kinds of things. But I think the other piece of this is to make sure that we play a role and help out nonprofit organizations that are involved in sports, Noah. So I think about, for me, it was Prince George Youth Soccer, and we have phenomenal soccer fields on the corner of 15th and Ospika. And I know I'm going to mention Massage Place a few times, but it's having, I think, really the foresight to make sure that these facilities are upgraded on a regular basis, and when you have to, you make the move to put in new facilities. And I'm really proud of the pool. That is a big part of the role for us. But on the nonprofit side, or the PGYSA association, or football association, baseball, hockey, name them, it's important for us to provide for them in some fashion. We have a group that from the city that will work with these organizations to put on large major tournaments. We had the U16 youth soccer championships here a couple of years ago, I think.
Yeah, I had that actually farther down. It was the BC soccer, I think it was the B provincials.
Right.
Yeah, it was the B provincials. I remember playing in that. It was really cool to be able to do that, kind of like with the home field,
Yeah.
that was really cool.
Yeah, and I think it's important for us to work with those organizations, and if they want to bring in these large tournaments, how can we help out? And what other things can we do to make them successful? It's very much like our community associations that we have throughout the entire city that do great work in their neighborhoods. And for me, it's those two pieces. It's working with the organizations and making sure that we have facilities that are up to par.
Yeah, so my next question kind of follow up to that is does the city really have plans for the future in that regard, in helping those things? Is there anything really in the works right now?
Yeah, well, as you know, I just mentioned the pool, so
Yeah.
that's been in the works for a couple of years. We did go through a referendum, so we went out to everybody, and the referendum, I think we had about 62% in favor of the pool, so maybe a little bit more in a couple of years now. And I'm going to mention one where the folks have been working extremely hard, and that's at the Oval. There's no question that it's difficult, given our winters now, to maintain an oval. And of course, as you know, we lost the speed skating competition in the 2015 games. It had to go to Fort St. John. But I'd like to be able to do something down the road when it comes to artificial ice on the oval. I know it's very, very costly, and the Oval Group, the people that operate that, have talked about it for a number of years. But I think that's something that we need to really look at down the road and see the cost, and if we can maintain that. And of course, the Coliseum is getting older, so we've got to start to make decisions on the Coliseum. And I think that our long-range planning is really boils down to age of facilities, what work has to be done, and make sure that we continue that maintenance on those facilities. So you're going to see a lot of work being done on the aquatic center. Of course, we've got the kin rinks that are in very good shape and used continually in a non-COVID year. Elk Center is aging. So for us, it's about maintaining that upgrade and scheduled maintenance, and just keeping them, as I said earlier, top-notch facilities for people.
Yeah, so kind of like moving on a little bit.
Mhm.
The city of Prince George, obviously, like they helped provide the cities, they helped help a number of nonprofits, right? So kind of like, is there any more to like the role that the city has in growing sports in the city? Do they have any role in like helping to bring, like, say for example, when the Cougars came to Prince George, did the city have any role in that, right? Like, do they have roles
Yeah,
in bringing stuff to Prince George to help grow that?
more often than not, and we can use the Cougars. They've been here 25 plus years. Let's use the Cougars for a moment. I think, when they were first coming to the city, it was about the city embracing and really wanting the Cougars to be here. And it was from an advocacy perspective. So if the Cougars needed support from the city and what the city can do to support their bid to have a team here, a WHL team, then the city stood tall and did that. I think that we have leases in place with the Spruce Kings and the Cougars at the Coliseum and the CN Center. But here's another good example. provincial football and the work that a few guys are doing to bring that to the city, and that just enhancing and really broadening the whole football perspective for football players, prospective players here in Prince George. And we're working very closely with them and doing whatever we can. If they're looking at land, for example, we can have that working relationship because we own a tremendous amount of land throughout the city. So if you need land for a field, if you need land for whatever your sport is, we want to have those conversations with you. And I think that's a big part of cost for some of these groups to be able to, if they want to build something, build a football field, a soccer field, what can the city do from a land piece?
Yeah, absolutely. So, kind of in terms of building stuff in the city, I know that there's been a lot of talk, especially with the Canadian Premier League for soccer. Right? I'm not sure if you've heard about that.
Yeah.
That they've also started to consider like Division Two at more of a provincial level, and obviously BC Soccer announced they're launching their own League One for the province. Has the city looked at that at all as something that they'd like to bring to Prince George?
Love to have something like that come to Prince George. I think our role is more in a support fashion and providing the facilities. So if an organization came to us, if that was PGYSA, UNBC, said, look, we want to work together to bring this league to Prince George. We think we can put a team together. We can be competitive. How can you help out? Well, my first reaction would be Massage Place Stadium. A big part of that $4.5 million renovation was so we could have a home for UNBC men and women's soccer teams. And I think that's our role, is in a supportive role, providing a facility, making sure we have the facility here. And then it's those organizations going out and doing the organizing and structuring of that team.
Yeah, absolutely. So, um, like obviously there's been a lot going on, especially in the sports world in the last number of years, right? So, can you tell us a bit about what the city has already done? Like not necessarily what it's looking forwards to, but what it's done in the last few years to improve the quality of sports in the city, or just to kind of help.
Yeah, it really started back in 2015 when we had the Canada Winter Games, and that really became the foundation of our ability to work with groups to attract large sporting events. And the reason I was so keen on that, Noah, is because I think as residents, you see that higher level of sport. It really gets you excited about trying to bring that sport to Prince George, or trying to increase that sport and the number of players in it after you see something like the Canada Winter Games. As you know, we were unfortunate in having to cancel the World Women's Curling Championship last year. Had to cancel, I have a whole list of the cancellations, which is really heartbreaking, but we had to cancel the National Seniors Badminton Championships here in Prince George. We had a number of larger events that were on the map that were canceled, not just sporting, but entertainment across the board. And I really felt that our job then, when we realized that those were going to be canned, that we start to lay the groundwork to bring them back. So we started that work with the World Women's Curling. The other night we heard from the Otway folks around the Paranordic Games coming back to Prince George in 2024, BC Summer Games in 2022. So for me, it was about going back to those groups and saying, look, we want you to come back. COVID wouldn't allow you here in 2020, but we want you back here 2021, well, 2022, 23, 24. And that's what we're working on, to bring those large events back. I'd love to see the BC Special Olympics back here. They haven't been back for a while, either winter or summer. The seniors games, Indigenous games, the national First Nations fastball tournament had to be canceled last year. And I'm been talking to the organizers of that, and they'd like to bring it back next year. And they'd love to bring it back this year. So I think that's our role. And I love doing it. Being a sports guy, I love trying to attract these big sporting events to the city.
Yeah, absolutely. So, you kind of already alluded to it a little bit, but there's been a number of large projects the city has undertaken in the last number of years. So, just name a few. There was the rebuilding of Kin 1. That was very big. That was for the Canada Winter Games. There's the renovation of Massage Place Stadium, which was a really big deal. And obviously it's the university team's home now. And I'm actually going to talk a bit more about that in a bit.
Yeah.
And then there's also now the construction of the new pool in the downtown. So are there any of these projects that you yourself are particularly proud of?
I'm proud of them all, but I guess I'm going to be a little greedy because I spent probably 15 plus years on a soccer pitch, coaching, and even more than that, watching. And when we were able to upgrade the Massage Place Stadium, in the back of my mind, I thought, if we can pull this off, if we can get grant dollars to put into Massage Place, we can then go to UNBC and say, here's your new home. And every other university that we went to had their own home for men and women's soccer. And I thought, it gives them an opportunity to put their name to this. And the home is not just their field to play soccer on, but it's the fact that dressing rooms and just some consistency, knowing that they've got a great outdoor field, though an all-weather surface that would enable them to, I think, alleviate some of the risk about snow coming to Prince George in early October and not being able to play some of those late games.
I actually remember that. I was on the line, and this is one of the games that I will always remember because that was the game. It got postponed. I think it was like a day or two because, or I can't remember exactly how it worked. It was I think the game 2 of the doubleheader or something like that, and it was in October or whatever it was, and that was the doubleheader. I got to ref the game. I was on the line. In the middle, I had a FIFA certified referee.
Yeah.
And then like top level, like can do a World Cup. That's their certification. And then the other one on the other side was Canada soccer. So any of the top level like Division 1 games in Canada, anything like that. Those are the other two refs for that game, not counting the fourth official. So that's one of my most memorable experiences. It was the doubleheader, and then that second game unfortunately got canceled and moved to UFV because it was the for the playoffs or something like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think that having that all weather field because like of that snow, right? That probably would have prevented us from having to from postpone that game, right? So I think that is a really big deal for Prince George. Absolutely.
And I remember when the girls were playing that there was some late season games that were very iffy because of snow. Well, if you had it on an all weather field, you can clean that off very easily and they're safe. They're safe to play on in that kind of weather. So I think that has to be the one that really stands out for me. But again, as I look over here at the pool, I'm so proud of it. And, I guess really there are some great sporting facilities here. You mentioned Kin 1. That was a great upgrade for the 2015 games.
Yeah, I know that the Caribou Cougars, Caribou Hockey loves that facility for sure. Yeah, they're very proud of it. That's for sure in the conversations that we've had with them.
It's their home.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And so are there any projects that the city has its sight set on for the near future? So you mentioned a few ones that you're kind of looking at, but is there one that's really pressing that you think next 10 years that
I really want to bring back the World Women's Curling Championships here. I think we really we were sad. I mean, that was the first thing we announced that was being canceled as a result of COVID. And I remember sitting in a room in the ice level at CN Center with the national representatives from Curling Canada, and then also with the representatives on the phone from Scotland, I think it was, with the World Women's the World Curling Federation. And when the decision was made, I just sunk in my chair. I just about took the breath away from me. I thought, man, are you kidding? We were all so excited about this huge event. And it meant a lot, not just to the curling fans in Prince George, but all the surrounding area. It means a lot to restaurants, it means a lot to hotels. And so that's the one that I really want to have come back. And then I guess the string of others is what I've mentioned. I have a real soft spot in my heart for BC Special Olympics. I was the co-chair of the Summer Games in 2001. And that I would really love to see come back to Prince George. So it's about, I said the other day that if you have a major event, no, you can have about one every 18 months, but it takes a tremendous amount of volunteers, a tremendous amount of organizing, a tremendous amount of work from city staff and on and on and on. So those major events, I'd like to see one every 18 months. And then the smaller ones, whether they be provincial or national. National is a big event as well, but I think provincial and regional, you could fill the calendar. I'd love to have them every couple months.
Yeah. Yeah. I was also kind of asking more for like, is there any like facility upgrades, anything like that that's big in the next 10 years that you really have your sights set on?
Yeah, I think we'll have to make a decision on the Coliseum. It's aging and there's a tremendous amount of work that has to be done. We're concerned about a few things at the Coliseum. And when you start to look at having to repair or replace things there, it's $3 or $4 or $5 million a shot. So the Elk Center needs some upgrades. And over the next 10 years, we will probably have to do something with the CN Center. We're doing some exterior upgrades to the envelope of the building at the Aquatic Center this year.
Yeah.
Hard to believe because that pool is not very old. But when you have a sporting facility that operates, 15 to 18 hours a day and the amount of traffic that goes through them, they start to wear and tear.
Yeah. So in terms of the CN Center, I know one of the things for me, I really wish it had a different color roof. I was like, because I don't know if you saw it. We did a stadium rankings I think it was a few months ago. And we had the CN Center pretty high because it's an amazing facility. We said the biggest thing is it needs different color seats, like needs the better seats, and it needs a different color roof, and then it would have been even higher. It's just the color scheme in that building.
Hey, well, hometown guy, you should have had the CN Center as number one.
We'll see, but then we would have been too biased.
Yeah,
so.
that's true. Yeah, I know. I'm just giving you a bad time. Hey,
especially when there's Rogers Place for the Edmonton Oil Kings.
Yeah, exactly. So how close were we with Kamloops and Kelowna? Because as you know,
we placed ahead of both of them. We put them ahead. Good. I didn't like. I'm not a fan of their arenas that much, but it's not that they're bad facilities, but. Like, especially with our recent upgrades. I mean, and that's the thing, right? Like, I think that the city really has shown a willingness to invest in sports. Like, even at the CN Center, the new scoreboard, the new boards around the ice. I think there's been upgrades to the suites and stuff, right? Like, all of that. Like, that's really important, right? And it does help grow sports in the city, and that was actually part of the reason that we had it so high. We have one of the top interiors and other than the seats in the WHL. So yeah.
But you have to keep in mind too, Noah, that was the fashion of the day 25 years ago.
Oh yeah, exactly.
It was pretty flashy. Yeah. But, we have speaking of the score clock and scoreboard at CN Center, that's a partnership with the Prince George Cougars. And going back to what you asked me a few minutes ago about what we can do to improve those, facilities or sort of the role of the city, that's a great example because we did partner with the Cougars on that score clock. And so when we start to be able to do that, and groups like the Cougars jump on board, it really does help out. And I've said, and I'm glad we brought the Cougars up again, I've said many, many times, Noah, that if you have a WHL franchise in your city, it is absolutely no different than the Canucks having an NHL franchise in their city. That's what it means to us. On a much smaller scale, I get all that, but to have a WHL franchise for us is so important.
Absolutely.
And then
So
to top it all off with
yeah, absolutely.
BC Junior,
Yeah,
Spruce Kings. I mean, we're pretty fortunate to have two in one here.
absolutely. So we've kind of already talked a bit about Massage Place, but last year that they were able to play, UMBC Timberwolves, I can't remember if it was the men's or the women's, one of the teams, they posted the third high, like they were in the top 3 in attendance numbers in all of Canada West, right? So does the city, like, do they look at this and see this as a sign that investment in the sports community, like in Massage Place, for example, is worthwhile?
Yeah, absolutely. When you have a new, not a new university, I mean, it's 25 plus years old, but when you have a new program like soccer, men and women's up at the university, and it draws the crowds that it did, not just at, well, it started out over at the men's field at 50, or I guess, what is that, 18th, 15th, and Ospika. But when you see the crowds that turned out there to support the men and women's team, and then they came over in much larger numbers over to Massage Place, it absolutely tells us that there's huge support for the sport, huge support for the stadium, and that excites us and really wants us to make sure that we're part of the group that's growing sports in the community. And then we understand that we've got a responsibility when it comes to facilities. And I'm pretty competitive guy, so I like to keep in, close tabs on what my mayor colleagues are doing in Kelowna and Kamloops, and they have great facilities as well. So
Yeah, I love the jab on the website. Actually, I think it was at Kamloops and Kelowna at our parks budget and how good our parks are compared to theirs with our smaller budget. They're just kind of like, haha, look at us.
they always
Yeah,
give me a bad time about our snow clearing budget at 10 million bucks. They're nowhere near that, but those are the little things that we get a kick out of jabbing each other on.
yeah, yeah. So, I mean, kind of with the Timberwolves, right? Like that is a good sign, right? And I think that like it is a sign that those facilities they are worth it, right? And especially
Yeah,
in terms of Massage Place, right? I think it's probably nice for the city to see a consistent like consistent event in terms of the university games that do draw a crowd.
yeah,
At a facility like that, right? Like especially when you have the grandstand there, it's always nice if people use it, right? So
yeah, absolutely. And it's funny, we used to go out to U of A, and there would be very few people in the stands, and a little bit more when you went to Vancouver, and even more over in Victoria, and then you'd come home, and I don't know what it is about a smaller town, but the attraction, just people get hyped up about it. And we, as you said, we had great turnout for fans and still do.
yeah, exactly. And I know for myself, it's really cool because like I actually know some of the players on the team
Yeah,
now personally because like I'm in university right now, right? So I'm in second year at UMBC, and yeah, it's really cool to see Damien and Julian on the team. I've played with
yep,
them for a number of years. It was really cool to see Damien. He started, I think, almost
yep,
every game last season, and that was really cool getting to cheer him on. Anthony Preston, I played with him for a few years, right? Like, and that's really cool to see these guys that I know on the team and be able to cheer them on, right? And I think that's part of the small town thing. And I know I've talked to people who go to the bigger universities; they know almost nobody there.
yeah,
I know quite a few people at UNBC, not like a ton of people, but it gives you reason to go to
yeah,
games like that, right? And I think that's part of what makes Prince George so nice in terms of sporting is that we have that kind of community here, right? Or if you know somebody there, you will go and support.
I agree. And the work that they do, and I'd like to thank them. They deserve a lot of accolades too, Noah, for um, uh, really the work they do in the community. Every sporting organization, and I think about um, uh, curling and all of the sports, but the Cougars and Spruce Kings and the things they do to help in the community from a volunteer perspective. The same with the UNBC Timberwolves, all of them really step to the plate. And if there's a nonprofit organization that's doing a fundraiser and they want to put a little flash to it, they may ask some of the Cougars or the UNBC Timberwolves to come out and help. And it really highlights the commitment that those players have, and it highlights the commitment that the university and the clubs have to our community.
Yeah.
It really helps.
Yeah, I've always loved seeing the university teams with the Special Olympics. That's always been really cool for me. So
yeah, it is. My daughter worked with the BC Special Olympics, but before that helped coach their soccer team and did a tremendous amount of work with them. And it's interesting because in 2001, both my daughters were very young then, and they worked alongside me during the 2001 Summer Games for the Special Olympics. And to see them be working with those athletes when they were in university was pretty special.
absolutely. So we've kind of already talked a bit about this, but I kind of want to go beyond just the mean to the sport or wanting to have the event. So obviously Prince George has been on a number or hosted a number of large sporting events in the last number of years, including the Canada Winter Games, right? The BC Soccer Provincials, so I'd throw that in there. The World Paranordic Championships, which is really cool to have. And then obviously it was canceled, but the World Curling Championships, right? So what do they mean, not just to sports, but to the city in general, right? Like what do they mean for the city to have these big sporting events here?
I view it from an economic perspective, and that's a big deal for me. When you have, I don't care, any event comes to Prince George, if it's 24 people that come here for an annual general meeting of their organization, that means something economically to us. If they're staying one night in a hotel, but from an economic perspective, it helps hotels. And I mentioned this a little earlier, it helps hotels and restaurants. It brings people to our community. And when people come to your city, yeah, they have to eat and they have to sleep somewhere. But at the end of the day, they're going to go shopping as well. They're going to visit small businesses. They're going to go to the mall. They're going to do all their shopping, and they just want to get around and experience what the city's all about. I want them to experience the lifestyle of Prince George. So the recreational aspects of it, the culture and the arts, and take a walk along the river, we mentioned earlier, all of the trails that we have. It's an opportunity for us to sell Prince George. So if they come up from Vancouver and they say, oh, I don't like the drive, but okay, we'll go. But once they get here, that's really important for us, is let's show off our city and let people know from all over the world what we have to offer. That has paid off immensely when it comes to World Curling, because they want to come back. National events want to come back. First Nations fastball tournament, they want to come back to Prince George. And when you can get them to do that, and look at the Paranordic, we had a successful Paranordic thanks to the folks out at Otway and all of the volunteers. But it's about showing off the city, and that, and the economical piece of it, and also for us as residents being able to see some top-notch athletes in action.
Absolutely. So I know I always loved hosting it here, and I think a good way to reflect that is seeing all the new hotels that have been built or being built, nearing completion in Prince George, right? I think that reflects that, just that need for nicer hotels for people to stay in, and I think part of that has it might. I think part of that is after the Canada Winter Games, how many more events it seems that we've been trying to host and stuff. And I think that we're seeing a lot more hotels that are being built like since then. Like, I'm not sure if there's much of a correlation there, but I think it is really cool to see the city trending in that direction.
I think there's a direct correlation to that. No, I looked out at Hyatt Place. It just was built downtown, the Best Western out on Highway 16, Pomeroy Inn and Suites on the corner of 16 and 97. These folks that own hotel chains and they start to look at opportunities somewhere, they absolutely will look at the things we've done in Prince George, and they feel there's a market here. Certainly not last year, but they feel there's a market here because of the things that are going on, perhaps in the resource sector, but equally as much what happens here with big events. And when we talk about entertainment, we talk about as well, Caribou Rocks the North, or when Elton John was here, Jerry Seinfeld was here. There's just a number of them. Cirque du Soleil that was actually canceled last year as well. So with those events here, I think you see investment come to Prince George because they know we're being proactive in bringing those kinds of events here, and there's an economic value to it. Big economic value.
Yeah, so one of my last questions here is, I mean, with COVID, obviously, there's been some concern that I've seen from a number of people about the 2022 BC Summer Games. Is the city still on track to host that? Because I know that was also one of the big things behind the Massage Place upgrades, at least from my understanding, was hosting those games. And obviously, it was this past summer, if I'm correct, the upgrade to the scoreboard that was this past summer.
Yeah, 2019.
I think it was 2020. I think it was 2020, but
2020,
yeah, so
the scoreboard, 2019 for the field, I think. Yeah.
yeah, so that was that's a big deal. So are we still on track to host that, as far as you know?
Yeah, I'm pleased to say we are still on track. I chair a committee that was put together to choose the actual board that's going to be running the 2022 Summer Games. And it's a local board, of course. So we've got that in place. We have a couple more meetings. We'll be announcing that board at one of the council meetings, probably in about 3 to 4 weeks, but still on track, which I really hope that can be one of many kickstart events in 2022 coming out of the pandemic. My fingers are crossed.
Yeah, I'm really excited for those games. I think it'll be really cool, especially to show off our city and lots of the changes that are being made here, which I think are pretty awesome to see. Yeah, so that wraps up my questions there. So thank you again so much for coming on.
Hey,
It was a
welcome.
huge honor to have you on. Like I said, not every day you get to interview the mayor of your city. So,
well, I jump at these opportunities. As I said early on, it's just I love talking sports and I love talking about our city. I'm so proud of it, and I really appreciate this that you're doing. Because it highlights what's happening in our city and from a sporting perspective, and that message gets out. So
yeah, so thank you so much for coming on. Hopefully,
yeah, you're welcome.
hopefully can have you back sometime. And
Absolutely.
yeah, thank you so
Yeah,
much.
absolutely. Thanks very much, Noah. Take care.
Yeah,
Have a good
you too.
weekend. Bye-bye.
Yeah, bye. All right, so that was my interview with Mayor Lyn Hall. Thank you once again to him for joining me on the podcast. Huge thank you to the city of Prince George for helping get that set up. They're a huge help, and it was great to be able to conduct that interview, and it was really good to get to know him a bit better. Yeah, so next week we have a pretty big episode coming up. Obviously, there is the NHL trade deadline, so we'll be having our reactions to that. So stay tuned. I'm pretty sure it's going to be a pretty wild ride. Obviously, something that's put a bit of a damper on it for me is the situation with Vancouver, and we'll see how the league navigates that in terms of cross-border trades, or even trades within the North Division. I think that situation's put a damper on that. So there should be a lot to talk about. So stay tuned for that. And yeah, thank you for listening. Don't forget to like, follow, share with your friends. That's so important. Really helps us out. And yeah, we hope you have a great week, and we hope to see you again next week.